I can't tell you how excited I am when these people who are totally non-technical and they're like, I don't even know how to use Zoom. And then I show them how to build their first piece of software alone. The look on their faces, it's more than just, oh my God, I built something. It's, I can do it. It's like this deeper sense of like possibility in their life that kind of like challenges their own self-limiting beliefs. And once you challenge that, it's like, where is the limit? You know, like, oh, I could do that.
Good morning, fellow optimists. I could not be more excited about today's guest, Christian Peverelli, who I know you're going to learn so much from on how to develop yourself and build something great that impacts America's future. Christian is a Los Angeles-based serial entrepreneur and digital strategist with over 12 years of experience building startups, running accelerators, and consulting for celebrities and Fortune 500 companies. He also served as the co-director of the startup training program that has helped over 100 startups go on to raise over $40 million in funding and get into accelerators like Techstars, Y Combinator, and 500 Startups. Today, he is focused on building the amazing We Are No Code, an online institute for non-technical founders of the future who are committed to learning how to build and launch their online businesses without expensive developers. There's so much more to say, but that's why we're so lucky to have him on the show today. Christian, welcome to Level Up America.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Gary. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome. Excited to talk to you, Christian. So we're going to dive deep into all things We Are No Code very soon, but this podcast is going to be a little bit different than your usual tech podcast. I'm interested in understanding not just your company, but also the journey of deep personal development you went through to be able to do what you do. Christian, my first question is, what experiences made you who you are today? Someone I would consider to be something like a visionary builder of America's future.
Wow. When you're giving this description, I'm just like, who is this guy? He sounds great. Yeah, it's a funny story, actually. Like, I think that, first of all, I'm very international. So my mother's Argentine Venezuelan. And my father is from Switzerland. I grew up pretty much all over the world. So I think that is definitely a big influence in what I've become as a person. I've been really immersed in so many different cultures, and that's really opened my mind tremendously to realize the great things about the world, the room for improvement, and everything in between. In parallel to that, and more on the professional side of my career, I think that as an entrepreneur, I started my first company 15 years ago. And when I started off, I didn't have technical skills. I didn't have any experience, and I was just winging it, which is what most founders still do today. Through the wins and losses that I had through that, both selling companies and failing companies, it humbled me, and it really taught me a huge number of skills that I think today are the backbone of how I bring value to other entrepreneurs, how I bring value within my own business. I'd say it's the great thing about entrepreneurship is really that it makes you evolve personally and professionally at the same time, because actually a lot of your own personal limitations will get exposed on the business side as well. And for me, it's constant strive for improvement and leading by example.
Really love that. So how did you come up with the idea of We Are No Code?
Yeah, so I think the idea for me first came up not when I was building startups and I was going through the process of sort of building software, launching companies, but when I was asked to become the co-director of a startup accelerator here in Los Angeles called Startup Boost that is now rebranded as Founders Boost. I basically was just looking at thousands of applications, and we were selecting the best startups, right? Which ones are the startups that are the best? The program was all dedicated towards training founders over 6 weeks and then putting them on stage at Google here in Venice. And they would pitch in front of about 100 to 150 investors. Now, while I was actually going through the applications, that's when I just felt this huge frustration. I basically was faced with so many applicants who had spent tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, 1 to 3 years of their life trying to build this startup idea they had, and were really not very far. And in parallel, I had seen a shift over the 15 years that I was an entrepreneur from you can raise money with just a great idea and a pitch deck till now, if you don't have revenue, like you're dead in the water. Like all institutional investors are asking for revenue. And it all came back to the same couple of problems. A, people don't have experience, so they're just trying to figure it out by piecing together YouTube videos and all that, and listening to podcasts. And there was very little actionable methodology when it came to building startups. A lot of people tell you what to do, they just don't show you how to do it. So that was one frustration. And then the other thing was people being non-technical. So I don't know how to code. I need to build a website. I need to build an app. Basically, regardless of what you're launching, it requires digital skills, and you're going to need one of those. And it can be incredibly expensive if you hire developers to do that early on. So in parallel, there was this movement called no code that was taking place, that is still taking place. And it allows you to build software without learning how to code. You don't even have to understand programming language to be able to build software. And before that was just limited to kind of websites. And now you can build all types of amazing apps, probably 85% of software with this. So that was the realization where it was like, we need a better way for entrepreneurs. I can continue selecting the best and helping them get further, or I can really help people who are trying to get started to teach them a framework to launch new businesses and equip them with skills to actually build their website, build apps, launch them without spending too much money and time. So that's when those things took place. And for me, it was just a way to empower the next generation of entrepreneurs. So that's what we created. It was essentially the birth of our flagship program called the No Code Startup.
That's amazing. Is there a piece of this where you are creating something that you wish you had maybe a few years ago?
Sounds like you've watched another interview of mine or something, because I always say that, but you're absolutely right. I think that that's a great way to start any startup. You had the frustration. Yeah. You definitely want to make sure that other people have that frustration, because in the end of the day, you're not trying to build a company just for yourself. But there was definitely a huge part of that where it was like, I would have saved like years to see even more progress over time if I had a program like this. Now, of course, the technology was not there at the time. No code didn't even exist. When I launched my first startup, we didn't even have Wix. Squarespace didn't exist. So yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is for my past self. It just happens to be awesome that more people are looking to build companies now than ever, really.
Love that. You seem like someone that has like a ton of ideas, and you see so many ideas. What other societal needs did you tackle or consider tackling before choosing this one?
That's funny. I actually didn't go through the process of, hey, I need to find 10 ideas and figure out which one is the best to build. I guess the project came to me when I was facing these frustrations. So it's not like I went out there and said, I want to build my fourth company. It was more like, oh my God, this is such a big problem. Let's see if other people have this problem. Let's see if we can build the first something that will solve this problem for people. And then from there, it just grew. But I think societally, I think what I was seeing was that a lot of people feel like entrepreneurship is not for them sometimes, because the tech scene has so much jargon and it's KPIs and APIs and like all this stuff that makes a lot of people feel like it's not for them. And for me, I love to say that like, it's for everyone. I truly and strongly believe that entrepreneurship is a learned skill. There's definitely some personalities that, like taking risk more than others, and those might benefit from that trait. But like the hard skills to learn, and I know this because we've trained founders that have gone very far who started with basically nothing, no experience, no technical skills. So yeah, I saw a big need to empower people. In fact, like that a lot more people are frustrated in their jobs and they think they have to quit their full-time job to jump into entrepreneurship. It's not always the answer. So it was really to help those people achieve their dreams. I think that's what my mission in the end of the day is, to help other people be able to achieve things that they don't think is possible for them. And when it comes to technical stuff, most people that I know are just terrified about technology. And I was that person. 20 years ago, I didn't know how to create an email address. I didn't grow up as a computer geek. I wasn't a huge PC gamer when I was a kid. And so me and myself going through that process made me realize, oh, wow, this is actually something that can be learned. And so I just want other people to be able to believe in their dreams if they are entrepreneurial, or if they feel an itch to want to try out an idea that they have, to believe in themselves, because that's the first step. That's what they grab onto to create confidence, and that can reflect in so many other areas of their life. So that's the societal sort of need that I was seeing.
That's really beautiful. And I think makes it even more spectral that you were not just surrounded by techie stuff your entire life and it was just so natural for you. I think that makes you a much better trainer, educator, mentor to people.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that I realize how important the psychological side of it is. It's crazy. As I said earlier, all your personal flaws will show up in your startup. Totally. Because you're being pushed to be a beginner in things, for example. So a lot of people, when they're in like a full-time job, and let's say C-suite executives, like those people are not well set up to start a startup. They still have to get down and start becoming a beginner again, because entrepreneurship in the very early stages is about becoming more of a generalist and leading by example, and then replacing yourself in certain areas by other people. And so I think that's really like one of the motivating factors for me, is to say we all have to humble down when it comes to early stage entrepreneurship. And it's very different than having a 9-to-5 job. It's very different
100%.
than having a managerial responsibility within a high level. And if you think that you know everything, then you'll very quickly get humbled by entrepreneurship. And it happened to me, and it's one of the reasons why I say this. But I see it happen to so many people, and it's actually a beautiful transformation, because you're having that exposure to self, and you're developing, like, you're pushed until the edge sometimes, and some days you wake up and you're not excited about what you're working on. So it's important to surround yourself with other people doing the same journey. And other days you wake up and you're like, I'm taking over. We're going to the moon. And both those feelings can literally go from like, in 2 hours, you can feel both of those emotions. And I find it quite beautiful that it empowers you on a personal basis as well.
Love that. And one thing that came to mind is you're making it sound, and I know from experience, that entrepreneurship helps you experience like the full gamut of human emotion. And I think it's important to not deprive yourself of that.
100%. Let's face it, most of us have a terrible fear of failure, because society is not really telling you. I guess in America, it's a little bit different. Like, people are like, fail fast and all that. And I think that's a really good mentality to have, because as soon as you shift your mentality and you realize, hey, what I'm able to accomplish professionally is not how worthy I am. As a human, I'm worthy regardless of my accomplishments in the workplace. I think it gives you the freedom to be able to then experiment and not feel so much like, I need to succeed, because if not, what are my parents going to think? What are my colleagues going to think? What is my wife or husband going to think? And I think that's a tremendous stress that kind of stops a lot of people from trying things that they're capable of. So that's, I think, for me, like a really beautiful thing. And something that I went through as well.
Love it. Christian, how did you go about putting together a team? I'm assuming it's not just you anymore, right?
Yeah. So we're a small team. Made the decision for this startup to not raise capital. So at the moment, we're fully bootstrapped. We've been operating for almost 3 years, and we've been completely bootstrapped. I have made that decision simply because I didn't necessarily need to get capital at first. Now we're looking into potentially raise some capital. But what that means when you bootstrap early on is that you cannot outsource everything to a bunch of different people. So we have a small team. We're 3 main people, and then we have 1 or 2 freelancers. And we've been able to find ways to be incredibly more powerful and lean through the power of no code, which is, funny enough, what we...
Yeah, you're practicing what you preach. It's amazing.
Yeah. And it's because the future is not a future, I believe, where we're all replaced by robots and AI. I think the next step for humanity is to start learning some of these tools that can allow you to not be a high processing power human who's trying to execute thousands of tasks. Like, computers are way better than us at doing that. And so it's more about learning tools that can allow you to be more productive at work. And no code tools allow you to automate things. They allow you to essentially build software that can automate other things. And through that, you can literally have so many things on autopilot. And so you don't necessarily need huge teams. So that's, I think what's exciting is, like, we're literally in the generation where it's never been a better time to be a non-technical solo entrepreneur, or a solopreneur, whatever you want to call it. And that's awesome. I think it's just like the world is shifting. Like, I think the education system was built around putting people into 9-to-5 jobs. Now we're shifting towards the great resignation. More and more people are wanting to be self-reliant. There's the rise of the creator economy. Entrepreneurship is becoming increasingly popular. And so it's important that we create a new education system, essentially, which caters to these new needs that people have. And that's exactly what we're targeting as a mission with We Are No Code. We've just happened to want to start with entrepreneurship because that's where my DNA is and how we got started. But no code in general is like only a means to an end. So you really need to contextualize it with a lot of other stuff. If you don't learn how to launch a startup, it doesn't matter if you do it with no code or with code, you're probably building something that nobody's going to ever use. And that's a bigger problem, is that 90% of apps in the App Store are zombie apps. So people aren't using them. And so you need to contextualize it with, if your end goal is to build a business within the context of what we teach right now. No code is just like 30% of that, because it can help you build the website, the app, but How do you launch it? How do you get first customers? How do you know which features to build at first? How do you know which features to build next? And all of that can be learned, essentially, is what I say. But the education system is very fluffy, loves teaching concepts, but it doesn't teach you really how to apply them in the real world. In parallel to that, I want to make a strong point that every single company is starting to shift towards skill-based hiring. You have people like Google, Apple, Microsoft, even Starbucks. If you have the skills, you will be able to. So they're no longer requiring college degrees, which means that it's important for us in this new world to learn hard skills, to not come out of a 4-year university degree and to feel like, oh, now after doing 4 years of marketing, I need to learn how to run ads, how to do influencer marketing, how to do SEO. Like, those are the hard skills. And a lot of these things are just not being taught at school. And so that's a bit of a frustration that I've seen that we're trying to tackle at We Are No Code.
Love it. So speaking of your team, walk me through the process that you went through of securing your first hire. Like, how did you think about who was right to bring on?
That's a great question. So the way that most of the hires actually took place was they either started off as fans, students, or mentors that I had worked with. So I co-founded the company with someone that I brought in to become a mentor in the accelerator that I was running in LA. The first major hire was someone who had seen some of the free content that we put out on YouTube and had been following for a while, had joined several events that I had put on for free.
That's awesome.
And the reason for that is because, like, there's a philosophy match, there's a vision match, there's a mission match. And that's probably the most important match when you hire people, is to make sure that people are really stoked about what you're trying to accomplish as an end goal. Because if not, it's going to be more difficult to get those people to put all of their energy and all of their passion into the work that they do. And so that's the approach. Even like, we have gotten teachers who at first were simply students, right? They came in, they knew nothing. Right. They learned real quick. They learned how to build software without coding. They learned how to build like a company. They understood the full philosophy because they were students. And so it really took out a lot of the training that I had to do when it came to like mindset. Oh, what is the approach here? Like, people were just already in line. And I guess the other thing is just make sure you hire people who have different skill sets than you. And then you're going to be working with these people for a long time. So make sure that you also have a match in terms of just like, you like this person, right? Like, to a basic level. You don't have to be best friends, but make sure that you get along really well with these people, because yeah, it's a long journey. It's not just like we'll build a quick something over the weekend, we'll raise $100 million, and in 2 years, we're going to exit to Google. That's just not how entrepreneurship works. On average, VCs are seeing that it takes between 7 and 10 years to exit deals, from investment to liquidity event, which is when a sale takes place and they make money. So with that in mind, hey, understand that like sending a co-founder, for example, is like looking for a husband or wife almost. And I joke about it with that sort of example. But the truth is, like, going to networking events looking for a tech co-founder is kind of like going to bar looking for a husband or wife. It's like, it's possible, it's just very unlikely. So that's where I usually tell people, stop wasting time trying to find a tech co-founder at an event. Like, lead by example, build your own first product, find product market fit, get to your first dollars in revenue. And then it's so much easier when you have something rolling to convince anyone, investors, employees, co-founders, mentors, to join your mission. Because you're like showing them, you're showing them the way. Yeah. So that'd be my answer, aligning on those two things.
And it sounds like you're practicing what you preach, or you're selling your own product well, because a lot of the people that are desperate for that technical co-founder are people that wouldn't be able to write that code on their own, but maybe by joining We Are No Code, they might be able to get to that point where there is momentum. They're able to sell to their first few customers and show traction, and then be able to eventually bring on a technical co-founder and build something more bespoke.
Yeah. It brings me to a quote that I heard a while back, which was like, there's two types of founders: the founders chasing after investors, and investors are like ghosting them. And then there's the ones who are just doing it anyway, and then investors are chasing after them. And you obviously want to be in the latter group, but your ability to execute early on reflects the potential for success that your startup has too. So if an investor sees you and he's like, wow, this person like didn't have experience, but they learned how to build this platform themselves. They launched a first version. They got a first paying customer, and they convinced like someone to join their team. Wow, imagine what happens when you give that person money. Because people forget that like investors invest in people before anything. And then probably in the idea and the market size. And that's a really important thing. Don't wait around. And I think it just comes from the fact that I've seen the options. If you literally are not technical, and we've trained people from UCLA, USC, Princeton, like so many different places, and lots of people who have PhDs, people come from like the corporate world. And it's funny to see that their ability to learn and to execute is so much more important than where they're at when we find them. And that kind of, for me now, it's even if you see intelligent people with great ideas, I don't know if I would bet on them over someone who is really dedicated to what they do and putting in the hard work, even if they have a terrible idea at first, because that's what you learn through entrepreneurship is that you come in with ideas, but you're not trying to prove your ideas. You're trying to learn what the market actually wants. And you're oftentimes more than likely 95% of the times adapting what you're building based on the response that you're seeing from the market. So the ability to get those first paying customers is really in the ability to understand the needs of a customer. And like massive companies like Amazon have understood that, right? Which is why they're probably where they're at now. They're a very customer centered and focused company. And it's very similar in early stage of entrepreneurship.
Interesting. So let me throw this question at you. How did you adapt from your early interactions since 2020 when you just started getting We Are No Code off the ground? Like, how did your positioning of what you're building in the marketplace change from talking to people?
Yeah. So there's one thing that hasn't changed, which is that we're still really early in the sense that like most average people have no idea what you're talking about if you say the word no code, or if you talk about the ability to build software and stuff like that. So that hasn't changed at all. Our approach has changed in the sense that our program costs $1,997. We essentially support people throughout an entire year. And the way that we do it is through video support, through coaching sessions that happen on a weekly basis, through like a full curriculum. And now we're starting to realize, and this is us adapting to what the market really needs, is that people, before jumping into a program like that, which they feel like, oh, they want more of an entry level learning to dip their toe into it. And we've started to develop additional things to be able to get them to understand some of the basics before they're willing to commit into something a little bit bigger. So that's something that we've learned. Another thing that we found is that cohort-based programs are very successful in really sprinting. So in parallel right now, we're going to be developing a cohort-based program where it's like very focused on, it's going to be a shorter amount of time, even more hands-on. And you want to always adapt your products to the specific customers that you're trying to target. So we've narrowed down on who we target as well. Like we understand we're really well suited for anyone who's from, I have an idea or I'm juggling a couple ideas, all the way to I'm trying to build an MVP with these developers and it's a nightmare. Or I've built a product, but now I'm constantly like having to pay $10,000 to people to continue building it out. And I want more flexibility. So we've narrowed it down to that. And before, I think we were pitching to a larger audience, but the more that you segment and go a bit more niche towards that really early stage. And so that's what we do today. We've readapted who we target our products to. We've adapted and added product lines to be able to cater to those people. And I guess we've also learned a lot personally about the mindset of the customer. What are these people doing? Well, they're actually going on YouTube and watching a bunch of videos. And a lot of them are overthinking oftentimes and spending much more time talking to their friends about it or like researching online of their competitors versus taking that first step of really building and launching. They're going to accelerators. We're now going to the places in terms of where we force and where we start marketing in the places where these people are already making some of these mistakes. So we always say before you hire developers, even if you have all the money in the world, it's not going to buy product market fit. You're literally the only investor in your startup right now. So be like an investor. What do investors do? They mitigate risk. They try to reduce the amount of risk at a maximum. That for me is the way that any startup should be thinking. And oftentimes we get, oh, wow, $2,000, but I'm a broke founder. And what's funny is that the time that you spend trying to build the early phase is actually your biggest expense. Why? Because you have rent, you have your car, you have so many different things. And so speed is really important. And it's, I think, a cost that people don't necessarily consider. And most people always just make all the same. There's 10 mistakes that every founder makes. It's insane. A
That
lot of
that
money.
that cost them tens of thousands of dollars in lost time. Yep.
So we're just trying to save people from that, basically.
Love it. Love it. So you mentioned your YouTube channel. I was scrolling through it. I was really impressed by how much time has been put into it. Would love for you to explain how that fits into the big picture.
Yeah. I'll explain to you basically our entire like small funnel at the moment, if you want to call it that. Because
Yep.
when I talk about acquisition, and people hate thinking about funnels, but everything in the world is a funnel almost, which is kind of funny. Like it's your fundraising. Oh yeah, well, you're going to have to reach out to 200 people so you get 30 meetings so that you can have
And
so that one person
yeah,
actually puts the money in. So if you think of
right.
it, it's a funnel. But of course, funnels these days are really linked to these aggressive marketers. And so it does have a little bit of a bad name for itself. But yeah, so for us, YouTube is the perfect place where we catch people and build trust with them for free and give them a huge amount of value up front so that they can trust us as educators as well. Because one of the big
Mhm.
things is that people need to trust us as educators. Like they're going to be working with us. They're going to be learning from us. And
Right.
so if they don't trust the way that you teach, or if they think that you don't know what you're talking about, it's going to be very difficult to be
Right.
successful. So for us, it's really that entry level where we've only been really doing YouTube for about a year and a half. But over the past 6 months, it's really started taking off. We're definitely seeing hockey puck kind of growth, and we're only at like almost 5K. I think we're about to hit 5K right now. But every time to add an additional K on top of that first 1,000 subscribers, it's been a journey that's been cut in half every time. So when you
Mm.
look at what that looks like exponentially, it's just like growth that in the future will be great for us. So that's
Love
the way
it.
we do it. YouTube, free info. Then we have a free course, which is basically learn step by step. What are the major steps that you need to launch your business? Totally free. And then right now we're going to be launching a platform, which is a cheap platform, a subscription. So a monthly subscription that you pay to get access to courses, get access to a limited amount of discounts, and to a more full curriculum and some live interactions as well. And then after that, when you're ready to actually jump into the meat and you want to work directly with myself and directly with my chief no-code officer, well, then that's when you jump into the full-on programs. So that's really the way that we do it at the moment. And then we know that people want to start doing one-on-one. So we haven't really been doing that too much, but that's like also to be expected in the near future. So YouTube is the
Right.
beginning of, and social in general. Like it's just
Yep.
really important to be present on social networks. To be frank, it's totally overwhelming if you want to be on all networks. So it's important to understand which ones are working for you. So for us, it's YouTube. We like LinkedIn, although we see that it's less like of a lead magnet. It's more of a good way to build trust with other types of people in the industry. TikTok, we think there's a huge amount of potential in TikTok, although we don't yet create TikTok specific content. So we create shorts that for YouTube that will
We're over.
repurpose on other platforms. But yeah, it's really important to start slow and to start small. If not, you're going to feel totally overwhelmed and you're going to end up not being consistent. And that's the most important thing about these plays, is like just consistency. When I started doing YouTube videos, I would post one YouTube video a week, and I just committed. I said, I'm going to do this for 6 months. I'm just going to create one video a week. And if I see that after that amount of time it works, then I'm going to keep going.
Right.
And it did. And so now we release 2 long format videos plus at least 2 shorts per week. So we're at 4 uploads a week. And that's really helped our growth on YouTube. But again, there's so many things to think about. Even the topics that you're talking about will start being directed by who you're trying to target, right? Who you're trying to add value for. And yeah.
100%. I take your journey as like a point of deep inspiration for me, because I'm just beginning my YouTube journey. I've had a bit of success in different channels for different purposes over the years. So did really well on Facebook for a while, then did really well on TikTok for a while, then Twitter. Now the beast to conquer is YouTube. And I really like that you've invested so much time in YouTube, because polls have been done about like how much 100 TikTok followers is worth to people. And some people will say literally one YouTube subscriber is worth 100 TikTok followers for them. I think that there's something about the maturity of the platform and people really, I think, valuing the recommendation feed on YouTube that makes whether they subscribe to you really meaningful. And so I'm really happy to hear that it's reaching this sort of curve. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's just, we still have not had an overnight success. We definitely have videos that have taken a little bit off, but not to the level of like hundreds of thousands of, like, we're in the tens of thousands when we literally, I think, only have 1 or 2 videos that have passed 10,000 views. So we're in like the long-term grind, add value. And honestly, like, it's also about just trusting that you're going to bring people who are attracted to your message. And it's okay if you don't have 100 million followers, as long as, I guess it's that like a trustworthy 1,000 people who follow
100%.
you. We do it for a very specific reason, because we're trying to run a business that also empowers people with deeper programs. So we understand that for us, it's about educating for free. That's where it starts. But yeah, you're going to make it. It's just a question of continuing to push forward on it. I think, as you said, like, there's really a lot. I think that YouTube seems like it's old, but I still think that it's only just getting started. And it's crazy to think that when we see how far it's gone already. The reason for that is also because it's tied and owned by the biggest search engine in the world, Google, meaning that when you search, there's some real SEO reasons, search engine optimization, which is when you type in anything on Google, certain things are gonna pop up. You get to take advantage of that. And you'd be surprised, like, there's formats like, there was a research paper I read which said that these girls on YouTube who do makeup tutorials, first of all, it's an enormous business. But the reason for that is because 2/3 of decisions that are made to buy makeup, the man or female goes and looks at a makeup tutorial on YouTube before buying. So that's like crazy number. So it seems like purchasing decisions are being made because one step of the research is YouTube. And so that's really powerful.
If there's 2 products, 2 services that I'm comparing, and one of them has like a legit YouTube channel, it's an easy decision for me. So I really commend you for investing in this. I want to switch gears.
Totally.
Can you speak to a really challenging moment in your journey which maybe triggered in you some imposter syndrome? And can you share how you overcame that challenge?
Oh, that's such a great question. Because the funny thing is that I always get this where like people like come to me and they're like, no, Christian, you're like a confident guy. Like they feel because people are confident, they don't go through imposter syndrome. Man, almost every entrepreneur that I know goes through imposter syndrome. I mean, I had a moment, and it's maybe not directly linked to that, but like where basically like our revenue just dropped, just like completely dropped. And we had to completely reinvent things. And it was so exhausting to have to feel like you're rebuilding the company from the ground up. And so I think like, I definitely felt like, oh my God, I'm not like a classically trained marketer, but I need to become a marketer to be able to be incredibly successful with this business. So it definitely made me feel like I was lacking and I was like not enough for what was required at the time in the company. And that can bring feelings of being an imposter. I guess another thing for me is when you read off my intro, I'm like looking around, who's that guy you're talking about? Because I still feel like I'm still figuring things out as I'm building startups too. Every time I'm learning so much more. And so I think that the more you learn, the more you kind of realize that there's so much more that you have to learn. And so that has a way to also make you feel a bit like an imposter. Oh my God. And I think for educators out there, people who are wanting to learn how to be educators, like one thing that has really been helpful for me to overcome that feeling is to say, you only have to be a couple steps ahead of the people that you're teaching. If I compare myself to Jeff Bezos, of course I'm going to feel like an idiot. But you know what? That's also going to make me not start. And so I think that being the person who trains a lot of founders, sometimes you feel like, oh man, like I can't believe I'm in this position to be able to help people in this way. So I really try to stay very humble in the insight that I'm able to share with people, and also share with them the fact that like, hey, sometimes my journey will not line up with your journey. Like you're going to have your own path regardless, almost every single time. Now, I can definitely point you towards so many of these mistakes. I can help you find shortcuts because there are strategies around this, but I always respect the decisions that founders make, right? So whether it's to follow advice that I give them or not, I will respect their decision because I've not always taken advice from people who were ahead of me either. And that either turned out well or turned out very badly. So I think you have to understand that those things are important to also talk about. And yeah, so many people that I know have imposter syndrome. So if you feel like that, like you're not good enough, it's probably just because you haven't been able to find a small enough goal, not a big enough goal, like a small enough goal to get started. Because once you
Mhm.
start, and one thing that's helped me a lot is actually just building
Mhm.
skills. It's like you invest in learning and skills, you start surprising yourself about your own capabilities, and then that builds
Mhm.
confidence that reflects in every other area of your life.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you how excited I am when these people who are totally non-technical and they're like, I don't even know how to use Zoom. And then I show them how to build their first piece of software alone. The look on their faces, it's more than just, oh my God, I built something. It's, I can do it. It's like this deeper sense of like possibility in their life that kind of like challenges their own self-limiting beliefs. And once you challenge that, it's like, where is the limit? Oh, I could do that. Well, I also don't think I can do this other thing. Let's say play piano. Well, what if it took 5 classes? And that's
Mhm.
actually a great parallel because so many people are like, oh, I wish I had learned the guitar when I was a kid. And I hear people who are like 40, 45, 50 saying this thing. I'm like, listen, if you put in 1 hour a week for 1 year, you're going to know how to play most of the songs that you liked growing up and you're going to have a great
Right.
time. But people don't want to accept, like, for them, it's like this extreme thing. It's either I become the best guitar player in the world or I do nothing.
Mhm.
It's so extreme because I think society tells us to be the best. And it's like, what if we're like not the best? What if we're only the best that we can be? And that's enough. It's more than enough. I
Right.
don't know. I've had to reframe a lot of these things for myself as well because I have a lot of great skill sets. I also am terrible in certain things and I'm happy to admit it. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think that knowing yourself is super important as well.
So speaking of knowing yourself, how would you describe your leadership style or philosophy? And what are one or two of the superpowers that enable you to lead in the way that you do?
I think that communication is potentially one of my superpowers. The ability to break things down into a digestible state that people can understand is something that's really helped me. I'm very much a mission and vision driven entrepreneur. So bringing people on through sharing the passion that I have around what I do makes people want to engage and believe in that vision as well. I'm very much of the perspective of you want to first do things quick and dirty. And then when you see that they work or don't work, you want to perfect them a little bit.
Mm.
So some people are extreme perfectionists. I was like that. But now I've learned that before you create software to automate something, make sure it works semi-manually. Before you try to
Mm.
get 150,000 buyers, try to
Mm.
just get 2 or 3 buyers yourself
Right.
manually. Understand the
Right.
objections, understand all the different
Mm.
steps that are in the process so you can build something that kind of is able to do that moving forward. So I'm very much about that. I'm very happy as well that, for example, my chief no code officer is the opposite of that. He's an extreme perfectionist, and that can really help me in complementing each other in that way where I'm like, listen, I'm always about Pareto's principle and saying, hey, let's use 20% of our energy to create 80% of the results because that extra 20% of the result that's perfection, that's going to take us 80% of the energy. And I like thinking that we need to be doing versus overthinking. And I'd say that those are like some of the things that kind of
Love it.
define my leadership style, even though at the moment I feel like I'm very deeply involved in the company. So I feel more like an operator and with a vision than I do feeling like a manager and having managerial leadership skills, if that makes sense.
Totally does. So it's a really interesting time to be a learner and builder because on one hand, there is exponentially more access to information than ever before, but there's also exponentially more ways to feel overwhelmed by all the options to educate and develop yourself. So how do you personally go about educating yourself on topics and developing the skill sets required to do so?
You mean personally, right?
Yeah, personally.
Yeah. So I love learning from people. So anytime I can learn from people within my team or outside of my team, I love doing that. I love going and having long conversations about work with friends who are in completely different businesses to understand
Mm.
their perspective. So that I think is more about getting perspective. I love online courses. I also think that boot camps can be very valuable when you have specific end goals that you're trying to accomplish. So definitely learning things like copywriting. I took this one course, I really enjoyed it. I took another course which was like more around like making LinkedIn work in your favor without being like one of these guys who's mass spamming everyone. Hey, how's it going? Buy my product. You add them and then 1 second later you get a message from them pitching you something. So how to actually do it in a more organic way that doesn't require spending a lot of money or being scammy. So for me, I think, and then in person, I just doing in person as well, because it just is a little bit of a different, it's just a different approach. I feel like for me, I learn well from other people. I need that kind of accountability when I'm learning sometimes too. Some people, you give them a book and they'll learn the entire book and they'll be able to replicate all the stuff in the book. But I think that most people, they really need and crave someone that they trust who can teach them and show them how to do things. And that's been the case for me in the things that I've learned. And in other ways, I've been a very good self-learner. So we were talking about this before we started recording, but like the way that I learned languages. So I speak a bunch of languages, and I was terrible at learning at school language, but I was actually, turns out I was really good at learning it by being around people from that culture and immersing myself enormously. And at first being the only person who didn't understand and slowly understanding some words and then using the words and then being made fun of and then getting over that. And so that's what I've been really good at. And I think that I've learned really well myself, certain things like that. And then just having patience with yourself. Like some people are just, math doesn't make sense for them, for example. That's a classic example. And it's just be patient. It's okay if other people are way better at you than at certain things than you. But I think that, just be patient with yourself and only compare yourself to your past self. Because if you look too far ahead, it's just demotivating. Like for me lately, it's been hilarious because I'll go on Twitter. And every time I go on Twitter, I think I follow too many like geniuses, but I just feel like an idiot after getting off Twitter. I'm like, oh my God, all these people have everything figured out. And of course, that's not the case, but it's like, just don't compare yourself with other people. Like, it's just not useful. It's mostly just going to, I don't know, it's not going to help you with your confidence. And I think if you start digging into like, how much better am I than yesterday, you can start digging into being proud of yourself again and feeling accomplishment, which then leads to allowing you to learn more stuff. So yeah, I'd say that about the education side of things.
Makes sense. So you mentioned learning from other people. Would love to learn more. Just let's pick an example. Who is someone who really helped you along your journey and how did they help you?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I've learned from so many different people along the way. It's hard to give credit to one person. And obviously, like the first thing that I would go to would be family, simply because I think there are traits that I have today that would have just not existed unless my father was the way that he was and my mother was the way that they were. And both of them were really ambitious. So I think that really taught me to want and believe in the fact that I could do bigger things in my life and that it wasn't just about clocking in, clocking out, making money. And so that drove me to want to create bigger things. Also, my mother was in education and still is in education. And that's really much inspired me in terms of understanding curriculum, understanding the way that you want to teach, that you want to hire, that you want to determine that people have different ways of learning than your way of teaching, and to be flexible to those different ways of teaching. So I'd definitely start there. If it was more professional, I would probably talk about a guy called Guy Vandebroek, who was one of the first investors in my first startup when I had no idea what I was doing. He was able to provide me with support and friendship as well as I was going along the learning journey. And I just learned a huge amount from him. I had a career that was mainly in the corporate world and in consulting, but there was so much takeaway that I could get from the learnings that he had that I didn't necessarily have access to because I was more in entrepreneurship. Like I was very quickly an entrepreneur. I had one 9-to-5 where I was head of sales and marketing at a university, and from there transitioned into entrepreneurship. So I think that for me to really learn more about the corporate world and how that was structured and how that worked in terms of how to, like, that was very useful for me, and I have him to thank. So, and frankly, anyone who's backed me, every single person who's been there for me, whether it's career-wise or emotionally, like, I just have so much gratitude for those people because they made me withstand the hard moments. And you will face hard moments when you're trying to build big things or you're trying to pursue any dream, really. Even if you're an artist trying to become the best at your craft, you might have times where you're just wanting to give up. So I think it's super important to have those kind of support systems in place and to prioritize them too. because we can very quickly get caught up with, hey, I just need to work 5 more hours every day to get things done. But you need to be surrounded by people who can help you check yourself and can bring you back to the ground if you're one day so damn successful and you're starting to fly a bit off. I think that like remaining humble and remaining like with this like learner's attitude was just so powerful for me to learn. And I always say the story, when you sell a company, you think you learn way less because you're like, oh, I made it. But you learn so much when you fail a company because you look back at every single detail and analyze and try to think. And so I wish the both for people. I think that overcoming also, like for me, I failed one company. And when that took place, like it dug to the depth of myself as an entrepreneur, but it also made me much more resilient and made me understand like, hey, I survived. Like I didn't die. It was okay. All the fears that I had around failing suddenly melted, and it allowed me to have the attitude that I have today, which is like long-term, which is always I'm building not for the next 2, 5 days, 3 months, but like I'm building for the next couple of years.
Well, speaking of long-term, what does the world look as we are no code? I'm going to reset that. Speaking of long-term, what does the world look like when we are no code scale? So think 2025, 2030 even.
Yeah. So we are planning on becoming the #1 online institute for non-technical people. We believe that no code is a means to an end, but with the right programs and with the right curriculum, you figure out what the end goal is, and then you leverage these no-code tools to empower a whole other generation of people who are not coders. So a great example is right now we're focused on entrepreneurship because that's my DNA. However, you put a designer plus no code equals a full stack developer. You put one of my friends, he's literally building things to track his daughter's chores built in no code. The future of work is going to be no code because everyone's going to be required to know some of these skills, these digital skills, to be able to be valuable in the workforce. The future of education is going to be no code because companies are going to be hiring more and more based on these skills. So we see ourselves as the education system that empowers people who consider themselves non-technical, because as we move more and more towards a world that's digital, we need programs that teach people these hard skills and how they apply to them. That's like the biggest learning is that no code is great, but it's totally useless if you're not using it in the right way. So it's like a knife. You could use it to cook. You could use it to kill someone. You could use it to do so many different things, and used in the wrong context, you're missing the point. You're just playing around with a bunch of tools and wasting your time. So for us, we think that action-based curriculums and learning hard skills is the future of education. And doing that through an experiential, community-driven program. So right now we have one core program and we're focused on entrepreneurship and launching startups, but there's so much potential in so many other areas as well. So yeah, we see ourselves as a future of education company. And in 2025, we're going to be one of the leaders in this space.
Amazing. I have no doubt about that. So We Are No Code is ridiculously inspiring, but luckily America is blessed with other amazing companies building its future. So what's another company building foundational tech in America that gives you hope in the future?
Oh, wow. I don't know the specific companies, but the areas for me, like green tech is a huge one. People who are tackling the problem of the fact that our climate is going to affect the entire world. I think those are just really interesting companies coming out of that entire world. I think that any company that's tackling underserved communities, it's a huge opportunity, and it's an opportunity that will literally empower entire countries. I grew up in both countries that are considered developing and developed, and that's probably not the correct terminology for that.
Right.
But I know that if you put the right knowledge in the right people's hands, like that really has the ability to change the world. So I'm super excited about some of these, like in the tech world, for example, like some of these funds that are essentially looking to really invest in these communities that are able to solve problems in that community. So it's not just about building companies. It's about a lot of these companies are really built around solving problems for people in those communities. And the more I think that we give that access to people, And I think it starts with education, but I think there's so much more around it. I really think that it's just going to be a better place to be. So I couldn't really point towards any specific companies right now, but that's the kind of stuff that really excites me.
Well, Christian, I want to create a media platform that is in some ways a funnel for people like you building these kinds of companies, people that are curious about the space. Like if I'm going to create any company, I want to create a company like the ones I'm hearing on Gary's podcast. And so one of those people that really embodies the solve problems for your local community is this startup called Justice Text, which just raised a couple $1 million for making it easier for local citizens to make sure that injustices are actually followed up on by the justice system.
That's awesome.
And I didn't know that it existed. And it's like this thing where I committed myself to buy more of these types of companies and founders. And like when you buy a car or your friend has a car and you start to see that car everywhere, I'm excited that's happening for me. And you also pointed out green tech startups. Yeah, there's a lot that are emerging and we need to get a lot more people building these kinds of startups.
Love it. And we need a lot more people like you starting awesome podcasts. And I think optimist, that shirt, like we just need to help more people become optimistic. Because I think we're definitely living in a time where it's difficult to be optimistic, where it's difficult for a lot of people to step away from their computer sometimes. And I think that optimism is a really big step in bringing people towards a better America and a better world, to be honest. And I think that America in many ways leads the global example. And there's ripple effects on what happens in this country, in the rest of the world. And it starts with just small things that turn into big things. And so I congratulate you also on the launch of your podcast.
Yeah. Honored for you to be literally my first guest. On the note of optimism, what's a piece of your optimistic vision for America's future?
I wish for America that everyone can thrive, but that everyone along the journey of thriving doesn't forget that there are other people around, and to create a system where everyone feels supported to be able to realize their own dreams. Because I think that in the American dream, there have been a lot of people left behind that have been promised the dream, but that haven't really been able to get access to it. So I think it's in line with my vision with We Are No Code, which is to really empower everyone to be able to believe in what they're capable of. And that creates optimism that allows people to keep going, which lifts all ships. And I think that if everyone is a little bit happier, everything is a little bit better.
Love it. How can a talented listener of this podcast contribute to We Are No Code and its mission? What are some of your needs?
Well, the first thing you can do is you can subscribe to my YouTube channel.
There you go.
No, for us, we're probably soon going to enter a fundraising round. We've been bootstrapped and profitable for the past 3 years. And now we realize that our mission is so big and we've succeeded in helping so many founders and we want to take it to the next level. Not that I need help in that area, but if anyone is and believes in this mission and vision, I'd love to have a little chat. I would say that if you're a passionate person who knows how to build things with no code and you share my mission and vision, then we're always looking for talented educators as well, because it's very difficult to find people who both know how to do things with no code and also be good teachers, which is really important for us when we work with people. What else? I guess just the last thing I would say is just do something nice for a founder, because every founder that you know right now is going through something. That might be something amazing. It might be something bad, but it's definitely hard. So just do a nice deed for a founder who's in your family, who's in your friend group. Do that for me today. And if you do, then you're forwarding my mission.
I love that. On that note, I want to ask you one last question, Christian.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience? Maybe one piece of advice you learned along your journey, maybe a cheat code that you wish you knew earlier that you'd like to share with especially younger members of the audience?
The cheat code is there is no cheat code. I guess that my main thing would be pass the marshmallow test. So I don't know if you know what that is, but basically they put a bunch of kids together and separated them into two groups. And there was essentially, you can have one marshmallow now, or you can wait and you can get two marshmallows. And the people who chose to wait and get two marshmallows turned out to be more successful in general. And so that's just a way to essentially say, invest in your long term. Like, invest in the long-term goal that you have, even if you're not seeing quick results today. And I know that's not exciting, but if you invest in things that you really believe in the long term, eventually they flourish. And I know this because I've sometimes been at the point where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Is this going to go anywhere? And it does. It just has a way to. The other little piece of advice that I would say is just start. You don't need to know the destination. You just need to know the next step. And then you need to trust in the fact that will bring you to the step after. And if I've learned one thing, is that it always does. And that when you start doing things that you're passionate about, and I don't mean just doing things that you like doing. There's oftentimes going to be things that are hard that you don't like doing. It's okay. Sometimes the obstacle is the path. But if you have that sort of underlying why and mission, then I think that it gets you through those hard times. So pass the marshmallow test, get started, and you'll be surprised on what comes from it. Whether win or lose, that doesn't matter. You'll have more shots on goal, and eventually you're going to be able to reach some of your most wanted goals, let's say.
Amazing advice to end our conversation, Christian. I really appreciate the time you've taken out of your day to share all your insight here. And I just want to thank you for helping level up America.
Thank you so much, Gary. It was a pleasure to be here, and best of luck with this podcast. I'm so excited for it to come out. All the best to you, and everyone, keep optimistic.
Yes, stay optimistic. Choose optimism. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed that video, you got value out of it, please give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, click that notification bell so we can get this in front of more awesome people like yourself.